What would you advice would you give for somebody playing in kind of the low stakes now, building up?
Oh, geez, I don't know. Don't do it. But you have infinite money. You could
Hmm.
actually make a fucking poker dojo. Basically, either I'm in fear or I'm in flow, like almost without exception. Mostly fear. So I don't know how great it is. Yeah.
Today on the Chasing Poker Greatness podcast, I am pleased and honored to bring to you Darius Bucinskas. He's a high-stakes online cash game crusher who I've had the pleasure of interacting with many times over the past couple of years. As a matter of fact, one of those interactions was me doing a consultation with Darius as to how to help better coach the Wolves to think theoretically and bridge the MDA to theory gap. And so in today's very wide-ranging conversation with Darius, we're going to discuss, following your intuition, how to discern whether or not you're being pulled by your intuition or whether or not you're being pulled by anxiety and or fear. Going to talk about his journey through CFP, Poker Detox, what he learned, what he had to learn after he left the program so that he could become a more complete and full poker player, and much, much more. And so, without any further ado, after you like, comment, and subscribe on this video, of course, let's hop into my conversation with Darius Bucinskas. Darius, good to have you on the show, sir. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Brad?
I'm doing quite well. Quite well. I'm excited to have this conversation. You're one of the humans that I know are very, very much plugged into the online poker space, like myself. So, I'm sure we're going to have quite a bit to talk about in today's show. The first place that I'd like to start, and it's been a while since I've done one of these podcast episodes, but yeah, I want to know the story of how you got involved in playing cards in this crazy life in the first place.
How did I get involved? Jeez. Yeah. I think like marbles in primary school. I remember now. Yeah. Some like friends of mine at like selective school would just like on lunch breaks when it would rain or whatever, just play cards, just like get a bunch of marbles, distribute them, play like 20 big blind poker, just like see what happened. And yeah, fell down the rabbit hole.
How old were
Started
you?
dealing.
How old
How
are
old was
you?
that? I just turned 28 yesterday. Um,
So young.
yeah, how old was I then? Like 12? Like 12. And then like 14, 15 in high school, I was like dealing blackjack and playing poker in the schoolyard for lunch money. That was sort of it.
Nice.
And then hooked. Like that was way too much money. That was way too much money in the schoolyard. It was just degenerate.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
So
yeah,
why
that's
why
it.
why did cards like resonate with you so much? Why you're playing for marbles, but also kind of falling in love with the game slowly.
I liked people seem to think that like skill and luck were opposite. That fascinated me. Like the randomness in it, the fact that there was skill, but it was like in a gambling game, especially poker, but anything with edges. I was just like, well, card counting, like fascinating. And poker stood out as something that was actually possible. But I knew that I didn't really understand it either. So it was just like endlessly deep, like making decisions under uncertainty and being able to like stick to your guns, I thought was really neat. But like just that potential really of making serious money playing a game. I was always just pretty into that sort of thing.
How did your parents feel? Like did you ever get caught, running your blackjack games at recess?
It, it was I was caught like several times. It was sort of like they'd mostly just laugh it off. It was for like spare change or whatever. I never
Yeah.
got in trouble for blackjack actually. The poker games, it was more like word got out, and then the principal would come around and we'd just be like, "Oh, we're just playing. We're just writing down numbers on pieces of paper. What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
And then, like someone would pay out like once every 3 months or something like that. It was um yeah, mixed feelings. Mixed feelings. There's been a lot of gambling and degeneracy in my family history, so they did not want me to go down that path. Um,
When
but
did it become a path? Like after the marbles, you're in high school. Where'd you grow up? And then, when did you go to college? Did you pursue higher education?
no, yeah. So I grew up in like Wollongong, Australia, like out like about an hour south of Sydney, where I live now. Went to a selective high school, but like I just my mental health was not great. It was not the thing for me. I just couldn't see going down the traditional path. So I
How
sort of like
come?
fell out of school, like had a like pretty severe depression. And through that, I was just hardcore into Magic the Gathering and then eventually poker. And I was like, okay, this is something I can sort of do independently. This is something where um, I can do it on the side in addition to, even getting government benefits or whatever. I can build my way up there. But I was sort of just all or nothing. Like I'm gonna make it. Like I should make it. I understand that it's theoretically possible for me to win in this game because I know some things that other people don't. But I was never able to like get together the consistent sort of basically I would self-sabotage at different points or stop playing within my means. And so there were a lot of those pieces that just had to get together with emotional regulation and actually having a deeper understanding of the game that I didn't yet have. Because like I started pre-solver era just about, or like when they were like maybe top pros were starting to use them. So I was still just reading like forum posts and being like, okay, like there's got to be something to this. Um, so then, yeah, I dropped out of high school, was just really obsessed with it. Um, like pretty much as soon as I was 18, I was like applying to CFPs and eventually like started playing heads up hypers, then like spinning goes, long break even period, and then some more time off, then got into cash and it sort of worked out from there.
What did you join any stables?
Yeah, I can't remember all their names. There was some heads up and spin and go stable I was in, and then poker detox ultimately. Um, after I had like sort of a 2 year hiatus and was starting to win a little bit independently, applied to them. Um, about a year later, like COVID hit, and that was a really good time to be playing online. So like it was a good sort of confluence around. I never remember the exact years, but when was that? Like 2021, something like that.
2020, I believe.
2020, yeah.
How was being a member of Poker Detox? As you know, Nick says we're friendly competitors with the CPG Wolves and Poker Detox.
I was a fan of it at the time. I think they were really onto something that no one else was. I really needed that structure, and the community was really awesome, where I could just keep coming up and learning, and I just have all of these same sort of doubts and mental game issues. But it was like, okay, there's actually a system I can apply here, where no matter how bad my like perspective is getting, no matter how like confused I am, I can always just like rein it in and go, okay, no, like what's going on? What am I trying to do? Where's the money coming from? Just having that thesis and like an overall approach. And then when Pat Howard came along with like Mobius and everything, and just like I've never seen anything that streamlined. Like it really blew my mind as to what is possible on like the data science level of the game. Um, Over time, I felt a bit like constrained by too many protocols and stuff, and it seems like a lot of people like sort of just leave once they get capped there. But yeah, was instrumental for me. I don't think I would have been where I
So
ended up without them.
what do you mean by the protocols? Overwhelmed by the protocols?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, not overwhelmed, more like constrained at a certain point where you can always come up with a lot of good guidelines and heuristics, and that's still a necessary and really useful part of the game. Like if people, for example, are just overfolding somewhere, bluff a lot. Genuinely blew my mind at the time. Like just like pretty much bluff everything. Then you get to a point where like maybe people are folding a little too much. Maybe some people are calling enough, or they can realize you're bluffing everything. And now you need to know, like, okay, I should probably bluff a lot, but also I need a way to rein this in. You start getting into subtler type exceptions. And the problem is when you're trying to teach like a whole bunch of people to get good and get on par really quickly, you can't have that degree of nuance. Like you actually don't want to encourage judgment calls because people who are like earlier on their journey, like unconsciously incompetent, you don't want to trust your gut when you're starting as a poker player. Just because like
Sure.
due to potters, you're going to fold too much, you're going to be risk averse. So you get to a point where you have to start thinking independently, and then I don't think any list of protocols or organization can really play for you. You have to like take that responsibility on. So getting a lot of like coaching internally and then working with people eventually outside of the company once I moved on, like helped me sort of expand my horizons a bit. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's operating within hard protocols or protocols only is good for the lower level people, but ultimately caps the top end of the higher level players, right? It's harder for them to realize their full potential, which is it all depends on like what you're going for, what your goals are as an organization or a company, whether you're going for like a handful of elite top level type of players that you can work with over the long haul, or it's just a numbers game where you're just like, you want 100 people in your stable or 50 people in your stable, and you're just like churning out a bunch of like 3 big blind to 4 big blind per 100 winners that generally hover around, 200 in L, make it up to 500 in L. And then some exceptions, make it up a little bit higher. But then once, their contract is over and there's not much more to gain, they're going to leave, right? They're going to try to realize their full potential as a poker player at that point. And so like that kind of begs the question, after you left Poker Detox, right? You left the CFP. What coach did you seek out? How did you make that jump from, the non-nuanced hard protocols to a more nuanced approach, finding exceptions, and kind of being comfortable living in the specificity of a situation and doing something that's like, look, I just think this is the best thing to do in this exact situation. And maybe it contradicts things that I've said before or beliefs that I've held before, right? It's hard being comfortable. It's hard being comfortable, like folding 100% of your range in a spot where population tends to over bluff, right? It's like an extreme example, but then you run into this one player that you just know is significantly under bluffing, and you get to fold your entire range against them.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think what you said about facing the decisions I'd made before is sort of what came up to me there, because like you start realizing just like, yeah, how much nuance there is, the fact that there isn't as much safety, or it's like the simple rules aren't 100% there. They were just like good enough at the time. So it is definitely uncomfortable to look back. Like I had a few things going for me. Like I was lucky to work with Matt Marinelli internally, like while I was there. So between him and like the data I had from Pat, I was able to sort of piece together the actual process. Where are these numbers coming from? Why is this protocol what it is? Why are people over bluffing here, over folding here? What are the spots where people are relentlessly over bluffing and there's almost no exceptions? And then where is it actually a close spot where now I can like nudge it one way or the other? So when I was in the company, I was already working on stuff like making judgment calls in close spots internally. So there was already a lot of wiggle room because a lot of decisions are still close, even with data. So then being able to like tack intuition onto that. And then when I left, I was just sort of combing through my old hands, combing through the process, just like looking for that deeper level of just trying to really quantify it and check, like going through this process, can I find anything else to layer on, I guess.
Tell me about tacking on intuition, because that's really intuition is something I'm extremely interested in.
Yeah, so like I like to quantify the intuition too, because usually I could point to something, just be like, okay, like I know that this would be like a protocol call or whatever. Like people tend to bluff too much here, but I feel like this board texture is bad, or I feel like I want to fold here. And on review, I do a lot of just like, okay, why do I feel that? Can I actually find any evidence for that? Is there subtler data? Has this player used like often it would just be, oh, this guy used a big size, I should fold. Like that actually makes sense. I could even like back that up with data.
Yeah.
But there was just a lot of having to check if like I want to do something for this reason. Is that actually reasonable?
And at least
that was it mostly, because it's still like the thing with the intuition too is like you never get 100% like confirmation, and you can always like just validate whatever you're thinking. Especially in like a bluff catching spot, they still usually have the value, so it doesn't always mean you're right. So like that's still the challenging part of it, is like even doing that review, trying to be more open to intuition. A lot of it was just being curious and seeing if I can validate it, looking for new patterns to tack on, but not having to be like 100% there out of the gate. Like it would just be like after 3 months, 6 months of that review, there's a bunch of hands I would play differently, or I'd find like I just find myself in bad situations taking this line. Is there a different approach to this spot? So really just feeling out my game plan on the whole, like why am I making these plays I'm making? And a lot of that was I did this because I was told to, because it's a protocol that did well enough up to this point. There was a lot of spots in my game where I'm like, okay, if I want to get edge against high stakes regulars, I need to do better than that. Because like that, a lot of guys don't even have that sort of level of a plan at low stakes. They can't like stick to it cohesively. But yeah, just trusting that it was a big switch to actually authorize myself to be like, okay, I can develop these lines now. Like I understand how the game works. I understand how to work through these solvers, come up with an intelligent guess of what people are doing, come up with a simple enough plan that I can follow and just like try to stick to it. But actually getting those upgrades, adding that complexity, doing that whole line work and going, is this better than what I was told to do by my mentors? Took a lot of validating.
How do you handle a situation where your intuition tells you to do something it very strongly, and so you do it, but you can't quantify any tangible data point backing up that decision? What do you do in a situation like that?
So what would it be conflicting with here? Because nowadays I kind of just have the intuition in a way. Like I don't necessarily have a protocol it conflicts with. I have to think of the spot. Um,
Or like upon review, you just, you're looking for something to like tangible data point to like root
yeah,
that feeling in to where you're like, okay,
right.
like in retrospect, when I reverse engineer this hand and break it down, I can see like the data point that led to me feeling whatever I felt, like that sense of either dread that leads you to
Yeah,
fold, or the sense that you think they're over bluffing. But then like you can't, what if you can't quantify that data
right.
point?
Yeah, yeah. If I can't find anything to ground it in, like even in like the whole picture, then often I just like let it be a feeling. I'm like, okay, I had that feeling there. I don't often it is just like I'm uncomfortable. It's something like that. It's like I don't really know what's going on. Like that's the most common like intuitive feeling I get at that point. So that just means I have to actually usually then I'll dive into the hand, review it. I'll look at like the spot in the solver, just try to like externalize what's going on, get more of a visual to branch it out, and then just see if I can arrive at anything else. But like I find it's almost always correlated. I think that's actually how I know it is legitimate intuition. If it's really coming from nowhere on review, I can't find anything. It's probably just like an emotion.
Yeah.
Um,
It, I do think so. The one thing that I would add, if you can't quantify it, it could be some sort of in-game data point, that timing, some sort of meta read on a specific villain that's like very like, if you were to like take this hand and look at it singularly out of context, then perhaps you can't justify that sort of intuitive feel. So like maybe
oh, I
sometimes,
agree with that. Yeah, it's
yeah,
yeah, I agree with that. I'd say it's like it's almost always meta. Yeah, like usually my intuition is not coming from like a single hand evaluation. Like it's always the whole thing is in context.
right,
Um, the tricky thing for me then is like, okay, is this momentum type base? Like is this guy actually a nit or did he just have value a couple times? Uh,
sure,
like because then I can be projecting, and so that's why I'm sort of saying if I can't put it down to something like, oh no, like he has been unusually aggressive, so that's gonna like shift my priors, my Bayesian reasoning. You know, usually
yeah.
I will be able to like quantify it, but
Yeah, it needs to be like some sort of range splitting based on another analogous hand that you've
yeah.
reviewed, that you're like, oh, okay, they're splitting here and like putting all their value in one and all their bluffs in
And
another.
that's where you can't get away from the work. Like that's a good example of like where having to do months of work on this review trying to like because I'd have a lot of feelings, a lot of suspicions that I like couldn't quantify, and that's what the actual deeper study would come to. And it would be like, oh, okay, so this is how this spot works. Oh, other people are playing this spot differently. Like maybe I arrange better, but they split. What is the split? Oh, okay, so some players split this way, some players split this way. And then you actually have something tangible. And it's like, oh, I had the read that I thought he was leaning this way in his split. If he leans this way in his split, he has too many bluffs. He's over bluffing, and you can sort of trace it
Yeah.
through. But that if you're just guessing at that and saying I know this shit without having done the work, then you're probably making a whole bunch of stuff up. Like you're just you're just running it.
Yeah, yeah. I would agree that like there needs to be some kind of reason afterwards. Like in game, when I'm playing, there's simply the decision and how I feel. And I tend to trust that pretty much completely. Um, because that's what I'm grounded in. There's nothing else. Like when I stop trusting my intuition to process a lot of information, then I'm going to be playing like shit. I'm not going to be playing at a high level. So like there's only that trust. And there's actually a quote that I heard in another podcast recently that they said that like the hunter feels the danger before he sees it. And I think that like that applies a lot in poker, where like you get a spidey sense in a spot that like, oh, this is kind of unique. This is interesting. This is different. It seems normal, but something about it's a little abnormal. And that's kind of where intuition, you feel it heavily. You get that red flag, and then upon like review, you're like, well, if the hunter was in the jungle, it'd be like, well, everything got quiet all of a sudden, like the leaves started moving in a different direction, or like there's some kind of telltale sign your subconscious picked up that was like, oh shit, you're about to be dinner, you need to start paying attention now. And in poker, I think it happens all the time too, especially for like the higher level players. They have this like sixth sense for danger before it manifests. They can almost like, they just sense it. And that's not always, it's a game of imperfect information. And again, like I took like 5 days off, and I played yesterday, and then my danger sense was off. Like in a spot, I sensed danger and I got bluffed. And, it's, so I do think that like you have to be in there battling regularly.
Yeah, that example too of like I have the strongest intuition that is probably the least accurate when I'm just like in fear or like fight or flight mode, because like exactly that, like now every spot is just like, oh damn, this is close, this is uncomfortable, they could have all these value hands, monsters under the bed, oh Jesus.
Yeah.
And so like actually doing the work where your intuition is in fact aligned with like, you know what, I'm going to do all these things that are really uncomfortable to do, like bluff raising a lot, making these tough cooldowns, overbetting thin for value, like just all these things that are hard to do, actually training them to the point of like them being intuitive and looking for what can make those decisions easier. That's very different. But yeah, like and being out of the game at all, like you're saying, like just not having that sense is spidey sense is the perfect word for it. I think.
Yeah. And yeah, sometimes like it just play a hand, and it's like, well, I don't, the wolves are like, why did you do that? And I'm like, I don't know why I did that. Let's actually like sit here and reflect and try to figure out why I felt strongly about this in game. And maybe I was wrong. Maybe that sense was wrong. But like, I think again, maybe one thing I found with poker players, especially these days, it seems as if they don't sit long enough with hands that like a specific spot. They want numbers and quantity
Yeah.
over quality analysis, it feels like.
Yeah. They want to press it all out to zero quickly as possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Um
I think it's because of what like it's like because it is really hard to quantify, I think ultimately. Like you review 100 hands you play, you make one of these intuitive plays, the odds that you even get to like make that same play in the next like 10,000 hand sample or something. So it's like it's a really sort of subtle like multivariate analysis or whatever that's coming in. Um, so I want to say it's just because it's harder to like communicate it, it's harder to prove it. Like I'm sure there's a lot of people who don't do that solo, but it's certainly not what people are talking about on like poker YouTube or something, because it's not, I mean, it's not scientific per se, at least in a way that's like transmittable and verifiable by other people. Like you need to actually have your own sort of internal method of like flagging the feeling, asking yourself with sort of inquiry, where is this coming from? Where is it taking me? Filtering it through the stuff you actually don't know. So you have to really like know yourself and like get a lot of like self-awareness to be reflecting honestly there. And then also be humble enough to not be like overly conclusive. So it's tricky. I think some people are really gifted at that sort of thing. And it also does depend on the level you're at, because that thing of like, I'm thinking of that intuition of like sensing danger and stuff. Sometimes like you just see that the person is like foaming at the mouth and like licking their lips to like value bet against you. And like you can just tell sometimes it's like a little micro flinch someone makes at the table or a weird timing thing.
yeah.
Sometimes you just know. And I know players who have great intuition against like high stakes online guys, and they have no fucking clue what fish are doing, for example. They don't, so kind of funny.
Yeah. That is, it is funny. And it's well, it's because when you play high stakes, I think you become very sensitive to how things are supposed to work, which allows you to make really good reads against your opponents, because they also know how things are supposed to work, and they're studying, or you're both studying the same thing, so you're almost on like a similar wavelength. But then when like you're playing against a fish and they like just donk pot, you're like your brain just fries. You're like, whoa, this is like donk pot on like ace seven deuce rainbow, like into the pre-flop razor. Like, whoa, what is going on here, right? Like that's not a thing. So like, yeah, I can see why there's this urge, not with the high stakes players, but like with the lower stakes guys that are like, I like playing against people that know what they're doing because like then I have a sense of like how I should respond, right? But yeah, it's really, why do you think higher stakes players don't actually understand how to play against fish or don't value that part of the game? Because or white belts, as I say, like why do you think they don't value that part of poker just because it's such a profitable part of it?
I think there's two levels. Like there's the ego side of like, well, I'm already beating them. Like, who cares? Like, this isn't why I got into it. And then I think there's also it is just a separate skill set. And like, like say, unless you had data, like, what are you gonna do? But if you have like the data, those sort of protocols, like I mean, like you're familiar with them a lot.
Sure.
Most of the big CFPs are familiar with them. I think it's going a bit more mainstream. Um, when you have a good resource like that to start working on, I think it's a little bit easier to be interested. It just doesn't seem like you can approach it systematically because it's like, well, they're not going GTO, and how would I know what mistakes they're making? Well, it's actually like actually they're making these these mistakes, and you can see them, and you're missing these spots. You can then have like a whole game plan. I think people do get a bit more interested.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's ignorance and then pride.
Yeah. Pride. I'll buy pride more than ignorance, I think, because like I think that most high level poker players that understand the fundamental aspects of how poker works should be able to tell that like somebody's doing something poorly and the way in which they're doing it poorly, what the counter is. Because oftentimes the counter is like dead simple, right? Like
Yeah,
anybody that's ran like a node lock sim will realize that like as soon as you node lock like anything, it becomes like the action you're supposed to take becomes like almost pure. Like the mixing goes all out the window. And then like the more extreme the mistakes, then the more extreme the node lock your response is going to be, to where it's like, oh, you just always bluff here, you always call here, you always fold here, something like that. So yeah, maybe I think ego. I would land on
yeah.
ego more than
I I think
ignorance.
it's that, and I think there's at least the appearance of more chaos and it being harder to be on that wavelength as well. So I think
Yeah,
there's less. You
that's
can't
true.
just open GTO Wizard and go, oh, you're close. And so like just I like even just those barriers, the fact that you do have to run a node locked sim, and like sometimes they're gonna have some random hand that you've never thought of. As soon as that
Sometimes.
happens to someone that yeah, sometimes. As soon as that happens, a lot of people are just like, well, this is a waste of time. Like this is uncomfortable. I'm having to make my own conclusions. I'm beating them anyway.
Yeah.
Like I really think that's the process.
Yeah, that's a good point. Um, I would say one of my like prime tenets with my players is like don't even try to range fish. Like it's just don't like just they will have something completely bizarre that you never suspect them to have. And so like in general, don't try to range them. Like, but you can bucket their actions into like, oh, they just have like pure value when they use this size or something along those lines. But like figuring out what that value
Yeah.
is could be God only knows.
You would at least need to cultivate this like 50%. Oh my God, I didn't I couldn't have thought of that range, like
Yeah, like there's no
yeah.
way. This doesn't make any sense. It's never going to make any sense. So for anybody out there that like wants to make sense of like what the weaker players are doing, there's patterns and you can definitely exploit them very often, but figuring out like exactly what they have very often or exactly what their range is an impossible task.
Yeah, they just want to feel something sometimes.
I know. I know.
And I envy them.
I got bluffed in like a 6K pot because the guy just he wanted to feel something, just like yesterday. Um, so you join detox, you leave, you get coaching, you're making upgrades. Kind of lead me through that process after leaving the CFP and having a win-win relationship with Poker Detox, I imagine.
Yeah, so like yeah, left the CFP. I was just like I did find as soon as I like left just realizing like I had a decent roll for 1K and L, but like my mindset just being out of the group and now sort of being like truly independent or whatever. Like now it is on me. It felt good in a really specific way. But before I was kind of like beholden to the protocol, or at least I could sort of tell myself I was. And now it's like, well, truly is optional now. So yeah, reestablishing that trust, like going, okay, what am I going to keep of what I've learned, and what am I going to like sort of change? Where are the boundaries here? Just having to reestablish that was sort of like a year-long process. Um, so I was struggling at 1K, moved down actually at one point to like as low as 50, like 50 in L, and it was just like mass tabling like 50 to 200. Built a 2K roll back up to like 20K pretty quickly, and yeah, had a pretty sick graph actually. I think I was winning at like 20 big blinds per 100, grinding from like low stakes back up to 2K and L, and just completely sun running. Um, yeah, that was a pretty good time. Then I
How'd that
started
feel?
doing that felt sick actually, like those numbers specifically, because I had to just like recommit out of like fancy play syndrome, like especially at low stakes. I started actually playing like a really like blue liney strategy, like a lot, just tightening up my ranges, going, okay, like there's a lot of rake here. Like I don't need to be playing like all these hands necessarily. Um, yeah, leaning into what worked.
What
Yeah,
would
that was a
you
hell of a time.
what would you advice would you give for somebody playing in kind of the low stakes now, building up?
Oh geez, I don't know. Don't do it. Don't like like online, like don't like even back then, like I the advice I used to give, and I still I think I would give this is like if you can beat like five or like play the lowest stakes you can to learn until you're crushing, like just absolutely crushing, and then just play whatever stake you're crushing. Try to get like a double-digit win rate at whatever stake, because if there's like 3, 4 fish at the table, that ought to be doable. So in micros, you should be able to find 3 to 4 fish games, hopefully. At least it used to be that way. It's a little bit trickier depending where you are online nowadays.
Yes.
Um, so that was it. Just like, yeah, crush a stake as hard as you can. But I had a lot of confidence in doing it because I was winning, 10 big blinds, 100 at like 1K on ignition. So I was like, okay, I should be able to rebuild fairly quickly. Rake shouldn't really be an issue. But if I wasn't already like an established crusher and I was just trying to like grind my way up with like a more marginal win rate, it's not it's not worth the time in terms of like a bankroll building type thing. So it would just be for experience. Um,
What led to the downswing at 1K in that, in the rebuilding phase?
so it wasn't even a huge downswing. It was just like it was now I was effectively playing for more money and like bigger swings because I was on my own roll. So there's a little bit of the psychology there, but it was just the self trust because I was sort of split between really wanting to like expand my game and challenge things and play even more independently, try new lines, and then that leading to like overcomplication or not, exactly knowing why I'm doing what I'm doing everywhere. So it was like breaking out of those guardrails. So
Yeah.
moving down let me just experiment more, basically, which is something I hadn't been doing. That was like some of the upside and some of the drawback of like having such clear protocols and a system that was working so well was like I didn't really have incentive to do a whole lot of experimenting. It was just okay, like I'm crushing, play really hard and just just go for it. Um, but yeah, I I think that was it. It was mostly a confidence thing because my strategy was not all that different by the end of it. It was just a few keys that sort of unlocked.
Yeah. So, playing with your own money as well as doing things a little bit differently kind of made you want to take a step back so that you could eventually, take a giant leap forward.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of that with poker. I think, especially winning players. I find once people have something that's working for them, there's a lot of hesitancy, a lot of fear around opening that up, I guess.
Sure. It's you don't want to fix something that isn't broke. Um, but you also want to make progress and want to do things a little bit better. And there's always this fear, it's as a coach, I've seen it many times where a player wants to make an upgrade and, makes their quote unquote upgrade and starts like playing a spot significantly worse in trying to like change something. John, I've had many coaching sessions with John specifically where essentially the coaching was me just saying, have you just like tried actually like playing well? Like you're in the midst of this downtime. Have you actually just tried like just, doing what you know to be high level good play and like not doing running these like crazy experiments. And generally those coaching sessions tend to yield pretty good results where he's just like, yeah, you know what? Like I'm a 12 big blind for 100 winner at 1K and I still remember what I was doing and how to do that. So I can like revert back to that previous version of myself.
Yeah, that's it. Well, it's sometimes just like you've had it too good for too long, and you've just gotta you just gotta try to run some bluffs that like won't work.
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta jam into the spots where, when you jam, you hate money just to beat it into your head.
Yeah. I
Uh,
will say though, if you never ever do that, you do stay kind of boxed in. But yeah, very mixed results.
what
Like
would
yeah,
you
that's some of the psychological stuff there. Just really realizing like if it seems like a close bluff to me, maybe it really is. Maybe I don't need to run that one.
do you what would you say your game is if you had to quantify it as part of like art and science? Like what would you say X amount of art, X amount of science?
Hmm. The experience of playing is pretty artful and like performance based, but I'd feel like the structure of the game is a lot more science. I'd say it's like 80-20 science to art. I'd like to shift that ratio more over time, but yeah, where I think the money is coming from is at least mostly science, and then the art is sort of yeah. There's a lot of different ways to skin a cat. Once you know how people are sort of messing their ranges up, there's a lot of different ways you can go after that.
Yeah. And as we've kind of talked about, the art a lot of times is rooted in science. When you really get down to it, you can scientifically say, like, you can quantify, oh, I did this. And as it comes to find out, like, this is actually a really good counter in this exact situation.
Yeah, I like when they're aligned. I think like I don't usually think of it as art, I guess, but anytime I am doing things that can't really be verified, can't exactly be proven, they're based on like internal data or like just my own experience and reads and stuff, like that feels pretty cutting edge. That's the exciting stuff in poker for me usually.
I agree. It's what makes it fun, right? You're expressing yourself in this way that only you can. Um, and hopefully it's a positive way. You're not jumping off a cliff expressing yourself that way.
Yeah. Just
Um,
bluffing instead. Just
how do you feel about your career in poker? As you got involved in playing cards, you've been doing it since high school, and even before. How do you feel today about your career choice in the poker world?
I feel like I can't believe I pulled it off. Uh, it's it feels awesome. Like the amount of freedom, like options I have. Like I have to pinch myself when I'm like comparing it to like I've been in the bubble so long, I've taken it for granted at different points. But anytime I look at my other options or I'm talking with other people, like where they're at in their career, it's pretty surreal. At the same time, I find myself, I guess like this has just got to do with like going up Maslow's hierarchy of needs a little bit. I do wonder like, what am I doing and what's like the ultimate purpose of it? And like I get a lot of joy out of coaching and like just that learning type aspect. But I do feel conflicted being in the gambling industry, sort of just trying to keep my head on straight and like not lose my values, if that makes sense.
What are your values?
It would be hard to quantify them exactly, but like, I'm realizing stuff like I mean, freedom is a big one. I'm pretty anti-establishment, anti-authority.
Yeah,
Um,
surprise, surprise.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure a lot of poker pros are, but then like, yeah, it's I don't know. I found myself like as I had like a bit more money and success and was like traveling around, it's just sort of going like, like maybe I should sell out now, or like maybe this level of luxury is great. Maybe I'm on the wrong side of the class war, and like that's the stuff that I don't know. I just don't know what to do with like the money and power and the time I have because it's so easy to just continue to just double down on more of the same. But
Yeah, this is kind of an ongoing question that you're trying to work your way through. Any ideas?
I mean, not a ton of like I'm trying to just focus on like I always come back to doing what I would do if I didn't, need the money or whatever anyway, and reminding myself like I usually need less than I think, just don't like compromise my values today, which is tricky, but like, creating more than I consume, um, not being on the wrong side of the class war. I don't know, just actually like spending time with people, not just being like addicted to work. That's a big one. No boundaries in poker. You can always work as much as you want. Um,
What do you mean by
Setting
not
those sort of
being
goals.
on the wrong side of the class war?
Oh yeah, that keeps coming to mind lately. Um, I mean, wealth, like this wealth distribution is just getting more and more consolidated at the top. And I think as poker players, we can see pretty clearly like how that happens, just like systematically, structurally, how the rich get richer. And by rich getting richer, I mean a very small percentage of like people who inherit massive estates and fortunes and continue to like push billions to the top. I'm not talking about someone who gets a great job like curing diseases and makes $1 million a year. That does not matter. It's like the asset inheriting class, the people who own your country, own your house repeatedly, like en masse. Just structurally, it's very easy to not pay much tax if you're super rich and just getting money for owning stuff. Um, by being on the wrong side of the class war, I guess I mean more. I used to make a lot of apologies for that and just say that's none of my business. The system is how it is. We're not going to do anything with that, and just playing very nice because it's more comfortable and probably suits my own financial interests more. Um, yeah, that's what's on my mind with that. I'm not saying like I've had like I don't know. I don't feel directly responsible for it exactly. I've just found when the world is completely screwed, I think that's pretty much what's going on. Like that's the heart of it. Like we have the means to fix a lot of problems just by taxing the ultra wealthy. I think it's like the only political issue.
And you being on the wrong side of it, um, like,
I was just saying like money is a meritocracy. Just work hard. You can get where you want to get. I think is a lie.
sure, of course, there's luck. I mean, there's,
but
you know, you,
there's just a lot of that like in the online space mostly. I just see it, like there's a lot of influences and stuff, the money culture on the whole. I think it's easy just to be an apologist for that sort of thing. Um,
sure.
just stand on the sidelines. Yeah.
Well, most people
And
don't
we
want to
glor
say that they got
we
lucky, right? They generated their wealth due to
yeah,
binking just a great pre-flop hand in life.
yeah. Well, what gets me and where I don't want to be on the wrong side of it is like say like I have a lot of hesitation to say that because I even equate it because I think there's a lot of messaging out there and you know, like say like eat the rich or something sounds insane if it is just like, oh, but what about me and my friends who worked hard to get this? And it's not that. It's like such a small percentage of people. It's like Rishi Sunak. It's not your friend who has a law firm. It just doesn't. Yeah.
So are you in danger of being that small percent? How much money are
I'm
you
not in.
making
I'm
playing
not in
poker?
danger of being the small percent. I'm in danger of validating and promoting that and
Ah, I
like
see.
normalizing it.
I see.
Or just saying like wealth is the point of life. Like it's all about money. Get money and you'll be fine and you'll be happy. Like, nah.
Sure.
All that's great from a sales perspective. It's not great for humanity. So
Yeah. I mean, money does make life easier. Like it
yeah,
does
okay.
make life easier, and
Yeah.
it gives you freedom, and there are tangible good benefits. But I've like anecdotally, I've been friends with billionaires who are vastly unhappy in life, right? Like they don't have people they can trust. They don't have a close inner circle. They just are unhappy. And so like I think it isn't everything. And there is this like greed dynamic where like it just okay, so like I don't know if this is controversial, but I don't see why anybody should have like more than $1 billion, like or something like that, right? Where it's like I don't like what do you do with it? Like what's the point of being
Yeah.
worth $100 billion?
I mean, that's it, right? It's like I don't even like there's issues. It's so easy to just deflect this as the thing, right? You can say, oh, well, due to the system, what do you want to do? Make it impossible to make $1 billion? That would be bad. And that's why it's like it comes down to wealth redistribution for the people who do have 1 billion, 10 billion. Like why? Why? If you want to make that money, sure, but there should be a way to then redistribute it because systematically there's exploits where the money goes to the top, increasing inequality, COVID and stuff being great for that, inflation, yada, yada, yada. And then taxes are meant to like sort of fix that. But then the people who are the richest avoid the taxes the most.
Well, yeah, because like, well, it's a game, right? Like they're playing a game, and guess what? They have influence over the people who are designing the rules of the game. And guess how they're going to wield that influence? Probably to favor themselves. Like, and it's almost like the most human thing you could imagine that, like, oh, I can change the rules. So I'm going to change the rules and they're going to benefit me. I'm not going to change the rules not to benefit me.
Yeah. What's gotten to me though is like I feel like most of the media is about avoiding like specifically taxing this small group of people, and even like drawing like a false equivalency between like all wealth and like that level of ultra insane, like you don't need that money type wealth. um and I feel like people like what gets me is most people don't get to choose whether or not they play this game. They just get to be on the losing end of that game, and
Sure.
then maybe beating themselves up for it. And yeah, all this is an aside to like obviously you have some amount of like individual agency. You can improve your situation and stuff to a point with certain abilities. But I think it's kind of tragic the amount of brilliant minds who I know getting into. I think poker is a great option for a lot of people, and it's weird to me that it's one of the better options. Why is poker one of my better options? Like compared, like I don't like this meta economy, like finance and banking type stuff. Poker feels sort of similar, but a little bit more free, a little bit more independent. At least it used to be. It's still tricky. Even poker's getting more corporate in so many ways. So
Sure.
yeah, these things like I don't know what to do about it. It's just it all irks me, getting back to values. I got a lot of gripes. Got a lot of gripes when it comes to values. I think most of my other values would be pretty straightforward. I like uh I like hanging out. I don't know. I'm just trying to hang out.
um, so you mentioned, you know, having enough money to like just do, or what would you do if you had infinite money? And I'm not wishing that upon you. But
Oh,
if you
thank you.
did, what would you do? Like if you didn't have to worry about money whatsoever, how would you spend your time? What's the thing that you tend to treasure the most?
It's a really good question. I wish I had a better answer because like I when I hear that I realize how conditioned I still am because I still like oh no wait I couldn't have infinite money. I can still feel it filtering through things. Um, but I think it would be pretty close to like what I do with most of my day now, which is just like wake up and walk the dog and hang out with people I care about. Um, and probably have a studio or something. I don't know, just make stuff. Like what I find is I can't entirely untangle my mind or like creative output from some amount of wanting it to be profitable or like things that other people would be interested in seeing. I mean, even just like making YouTube videos, needing to get views to a certain extent. I guess I would ideally create stuff with even like less interest there. Um, but yeah, I don't know really. I don't know. Not there yet.
Yeah, it's it's something that me and my wife have talked about, and I think I'm in a pretty lucky position where if I had infinite money, then I think I would just do what I do. I really enjoy helping people. I really enjoy coaching. I really enjoy being a guide in the journey of my players and seeing them have success, and also being in a position to pick them up off the ground when they splat. I just really treasure the space that I'm in my life right now as a coach and mentor to my players. And that's what I think that's what I would do if I just had infinite money. I would, I never actually want to retire. I don't want to quit, just do nothing. I think I've done nothing before because as a
Yeah.
poker player I've had the option of I just do nothing for a year. I did it. And guess what? It was really boring for me. It was not stimulating. I played so many hours of Path of Exile that I can't even count. Like it just so much video games and
Oh yeah, no,
boredom.
yeah. I would just go all in at being a Magic the Gathering pro, actually. That's my
Mm,
present day answer. I
There you
probably put
go.
more hours into that than poker. Would
Yeah.
you would you coach poker players, or would you just coach people generally in some capacity? Because this is
I would probably coach poker players at least initially because that's what I'm best at.
yeah,
I
still very
feel like that's what I've worked on for the past number of years. That's all I've thought about and all I've done. And so, I believe that in a lot of ways, it feels like the poker dream is almost dying in a sense that like there's this kind of gloom in the industry that like you shouldn't start playing poker. You shouldn't be a professional poker player. Like you should do something else on the side or you should do something else and play poker on the side type thing. And I just see like kind of the erosion of the poker dream. And so like for me, I want to do everything I can because I believe like poker's given me a great life. I'm happy with my life. I'm happy. All the best things in my life have come from this game. I met my wife playing poker. All of my best friends, I've met all of them through poker. Like poker has given me so much. And it just seems really sad that like this thought that you can't do what I did. You can't just play poker for a living anymore. That future just kind of makes me sad. And so like I actually am really motivated to help people to facilitate people in living their own poker dream. Like that matters to me a lot, and I think it's really important. And until the bots take over the world and that's no longer a possibility, I think I want to fight the good fight and do whatever I can to keep helping this group of people. And as a CFP runner, at least in my experience, I don't know how the other CFPs work, but like I love my players. I legitimately love every single one of them. I root for them. When I'm laying in bed at night, I'm thinking about how I can communicate something to them, like in their poker play, to help them progress as players. Like it's just, yeah, that's what I love. It really resonates with my spirit. And so I think I would be a poker coach for the foreseeable future until if the poker dream was completely dead, then I would have to pivot and transition to something else. But right now I'm interested in just becoming the best coach I can possibly be.
nice. Yeah, I think that's the dream. Yeah. I don't yeah, I've mostly learned yeah, I keep going back to similar stuff. Like whenever I have like traveled more or like spent more money for the sake of it, I just like immediately I get used to it. And I'm like, just just be coaching at home, It's like what else is there to do? It's a lot, it's very satisfying. Yeah.
For sure. And my favorite times are when we go on a trip. Like we get all the wolves together, we hit a location, we stay together for, a week, 2 weeks, and just fellowship and hang out. And like the poker aspect of that to me is actually like the least appealing part, where I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go to the casino with you guys, I'm gonna play, but like I'm here for the board games at 9 o'clock at night where we're all laughing and having a good time. And that to me is the most fun part of my job, the most fun part of the gig.
I've thought so like okay, let's follow this through to its extreme to imagine you actually had you have infinite money.
Sure.
So like now you don't actually even need to profit from poker. You don't have to go and like pick the good games. You could
Mm-hmm.
actually make a fucking poker dojo. You could actually just have people legitimately playing against each
Mm.
other, trying to be the best players they could be, even without a profit incentive. I find that very interesting. Would we be motivated to do it? I don't know, but
That would be
um,
fun.
because we don't do like because poker is not this the thing. There's all these other meta like things around it because we're just in the actual world. That very few people are sitting down trying to be the best player you can be. That's some of the allure of like I don't know, top competition, super high rollers or whatever. But it would be amazing if we could just play like, hey, play 50 heads up matches against this guy and play the heads up ladder or something, and then whoever wins that ladder is like actually this heads up sicko because we're putting in volume, and you just play like 2,000 heads up matches a month. Like we don't have direct competition in poker very much.
Yeah,
Um,
because of the economics of it.
yeah, just poker economic doesn't work that way. Like most of the richest players are not the strongest players, certainly on a technical level. Like,
Oh, for sure not. And in some ways, poker has become a game of of like seeing how bad you can play while
yeah,
making a profit. Like seeing how bad, like, and just like, okay, I hate how the poker community's focus now appears to be to not try. That drives me up a fucking wall. That like, in what other industry are people not trying at the top, right? Like, oh, like you should not try to get better at poker. Like, don't try. Like, you actually want to play badly. That's what you should aspire to do. Like, and it just like blows my mind.
Any private game runner should know that I've never studied a day in my life, and I don't plan to start soon.
Yeah, I fucking study every single day. Guess what? Don't invite me to your private game. Don't invite me to your live stream. I don't care. Like, I take pride in how good I am at this fucking game because it's what I've spent my life pursuing, period. Like, it's my life's work. And it's almost like, I feel like the powers that be want people to feel bad for trying hard to be good at poker. Like,
yeah, I think so. Like, poker is not dead, but I even feel like, yeah, that whole don't start playing poker thing, like a lot of it is, even like most pros are actually kind of soft and they just have a good game and they're trying to stay in that game and like not rock the boat. Like that was a big part of like some of the eureka moments just coming up was like, oh wow, like literally everyone sucks at this game, like myself included. Like everyone is just really soft and hoping you don't do that thing they don't want you to do. Like hoping you're just the guy who folds all the time or like is just going to punt it off mentally. Like if you can be consistent and actually just pay attention and you've obviously got the underlying aptitude for the game, like sky's sort of the limit with it.
But yeah, if you're comfortable in chaos and comfortable being uncomfortable, and just try. Like, my God, the amount of people that just don't try.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good, that's resonating with me a lot right now because I've noticed that and I've been falling into it myself. Just the lack of pride in actually trying and improving, especially if you don't have to. There's something to like, efficiency and like the other end of that, I guess, is like I think I might be guilty of this, where I'll sometimes make fun of specifically people who just like overthink and go super hard into solvers for like no benefit. I don't mean to like discourage people from just like deep curiosity and like exploring, but like realize that's what you're doing, that it isn't actually like a linear improvement type thing. Like sometimes you do just need to explore and like go at it. But anything in your pursuit of actually understanding the game and making it your own, like
yeah,
it's so easy to lose that even as you have more success. It's one of the scarier things about it, like either just falling into complacency or whatever else,
which is a trap I've fallen into, right? Like, especially as like a lone wolf. I think I was way more susceptible to it as a lone wolf because like, whatever, like I'm doing well and I'm just putting in my hours, putting in my hands, playing my volume, making money, and you just kind of don't fall out of like the study habits, and you feel like you don't even need to study a ton to like still crush people. But then like the CFP has made it to where like I'm always on. I always have to think about poker and think about getting better so that I can communicate that information to my team. And so like when it's for me, it's funny. I will be complacent for me because I feel like I probably care less about me than I do my people. And I don't want to be complacent for them. And like a prime example is, 2 nights ago, I'm laying in bed at night thinking about merging. Like, it's just like, I'm just like thinking about, and like, I'm writing in my journal about merging and like learning more about like the benefits, the pros, the cons, when you should do it, when you should over merge, when you should under merge, like all just, and that's just how it is for me these days. Is like, I'm 20 years into my career, which is crazy to say, and still learning and growing. And that really speaks to your statement. Like, yeah, everybody's like not very good at this game. Like as human beings, there's just, I feel like unless you're the anomaly of anomalies, there's always another secret. There's always something more to learn. There's always ways that you can get better. And it's sad to me when we kind of get complacent and stop learning and feel like we just kind of, we got it down. We don't need to move forward anymore.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny too, like the ways that can happen, because I think at least theoretically, like the metagame only goes so far as well. So you could over-engineer something past a certain point, but often it's like work. Okay, I've got it. I'm working, or you just go on an upswing. brain goes, okay, I've got this on lock. Let's go into power saving mode and not think about this anymore. Then you kind of have to shake yourself out of it. And a lot of people, it ends up just being like entirely momentum based on results. Oh, fuck, I should study. And then then you get back
Right.
into it.
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah.
good to just be aware of those fluctuations though, like just the way the mind is trying to just move to power saving mode and just like shut off, I think is pretty much the default.
Yeah, and I've been desperately trying to get all of my players to simultaneously be crushing the games all at the same moment, and it's yet to happen. So I'm always on some kind of downswing because one of my guys is always on some kind of downswing.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
So we're gonna move to more lightning round here. What's the most unexpected thing that's come from your poker journey?
Oh, I'm so bad at these. Hmm. I'd say I'm more spiritual since, more religious or something like that. Not religious. That's the wrong word. I was a staunch atheist growing up, and somehow through just like reflecting on truth and stuff, I became a lot more open-minded, let's say. Just to the mystery of things. Like I found there's a limit to what I can think of rationally that ends up so just having to like surrender to some sort of like intelligence beyond myself has like come up repeatedly. So I gotten a lot of value out of spiritual or like religious type ideas that I would have like scoffed at before. I think
Wow.
just
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. What's your process for regularly improving your game? What does that look like?
It's a little less regular. Like so, how would I put it? It's like I haven't been in a consistent online grind for a while, so the standard sort of just hand review routine has been a bit trickier, but it pretty much still is. It's just like play, review. Let me think. Yeah, like I'm playing my sessions, I'm reviewing my hands. That's sort of like that more intuitive process we talked about near the beginning. That sort of brings up hands that I'm gonna study or like specific patterns. Often that's just like, okay, I'm getting afraid in this sort of spot. But that gives me a list of like 2 or 3 things to be working on. Then I have a structured study approach for that, and I just try to resolve those specific kinks in the game because the overall plan is sort of there. So it's like, okay, where am I messing up a certain line or what spots are giving me trouble? Study those, play again, and review. It's just sort of that overall process of
What's that
reviewing, studying, implementing.
What's that structured like troubleshooting routine look like?
It really varies. It's kind of like it's kind of free form. It really depends on the problem I'm diagnosing, I guess.
Do you have any examples?
It's yeah, so it might just be like, okay, I wasn't sure what my bet size is on the turn in this 3-bet pot or why. I'm struggling to come up with like a crisp example. Like most of these hands end up being pretty boring in isolation, like once you've figured out like the mechanics of it and you're just resolving it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure an example will come to your mind as soon as we stop recording. It'll.
Oh my god, yeah, I've got.
This is the way that it goes.
Yeah, like often like the reviews I've been doing lately, it's been like I've been playing a lot of like softer high stakes games, so it's been a lot less technical. It's been a lot more where is fear getting in my way here? Where am I overcomplicating something? And then that often leads me back to like, okay, well, what is my personal protocol? Why am I even doubting that? And just seeing like, okay, is the simple standard approach going to work here? And so filter basically I have my game structure and I have, do I want to overbluff or underbluff? How do I want to distribute my range under the hood? And then that's a process of either data or like player analysis and just checking like what is my standard and then how do I be deliberately imbalanced here and go node by node. It's different if I'm looking at a proactive thing, like how do I want to be bluffing, how I want to bluff depends on how I'm going to be playing my value generally against regs.
Sure.
And on defense, it's sort of trying to figure out what they're doing and just reverse engineering it and just like looking for these trends. So if there's no edge that I can sort of sense either intuitively or whatever else. I'm just trying to get a clear enough idea of that baseline GTO type thing, shift, and then know how to shift either overfold or overbluff as I would like to. So find that baseline, look for any deliberate imbalance, and implement it. Because if I have no idea what's going on structurally, or I have no idea what the imbalance is, then I'm just entirely guessing. So I'm either trying to neutralize it or lean harder into the things I know about. And so a lot of the upgrade on review is like, oh, I knew I should run this crazy bluff. But at the time I was like, oh, on this board, no. And then I just check and go, actually, no, yes, also on this board. Like, look, they're still folding like so much.
Sure.
I should just do that anyway. So it's often just debugging something in that overall process because the structure is sort of there.
And you've mentioned fear a couple of times as kind of a marker that helps you troubleshoot or gives you kind of entry points into what you should investigate. How have you gone about cultivating that awareness that you feel fear, as opposed to, you know, the other myriad of emotions that you feel in poker, where it's like, oh, I there's my old friend fear again, and I really need to look into what's going on in this exact spot.
Usually if I'm overthinking a decision or I'm regretting a decision, like fear comes in somewhere. It's like fear or doubt. And I can tell certain somatic things like, you know, a tightness in my chest or other sort of signals. So I'm aware of the physiological signals. That's definitely the first step of just awareness. If you're struggling with tuning into anything like that, just start with the physical sensations and then label them as whatever else. So like that correlation. There's a term for that. I think it's like normalized male alexithymia I heard of recently. Well, apparently just like the average male population, like pretty much almost all men are really bad at tuning into what they're actually feeling, like, and naming emotions, basically emotional intelligence and awareness.
Sure. Need some Brene Brown work.
Yeah. So I think I assume that I'm experiencing fear in every single hand and every single session at the poker table, unless I can feel that I am just locked in. Like, basically, either I'm in fear or I'm in flow, like almost without exception.
Oh wow, that's great. What?
It's mostly fear, like so I don't know how great it is. Yeah.
Well, there is this heightened sense of awareness in when you're competing or playing. You know that you're in the jungle, right? Like there are threats all around you, and so like fear is rightful. Fear is energy that can bring you to be aware or hyper aware of all of the subtle nuances of things that are happening all around you. So I think that like fear does have a place. It does have a benefit to poker players, and because of your win rate, the fact is like if you feel fear most of the time, you seem to be excelling while feeling fear or feeling afraid. And so in my opinion, fear can be leveraged as energy, and it causes hyper awareness and drives, in a lot of cases, above the rim decision making or below the rim decision making, depending if you're terrified.
I think you're right about that. Like, and specifically working with it and being aware of it instead of trying to deny it or push it away. Like, oh, I shouldn't be afraid. Like, Solver does this. I should feel no fear. Just click the button. Like, that's what tends to lead to like punts and blow ups or just playing unconsciously and then not even reviewing. Because I'm just like, no, I felt no fear. I was just, every decision was either close or clear. Why would I ever review a fucking session? And then every time I review a session that I've been avoiding for a week or two, I lost like 27,000 on a stream recently. I'm going to be uploading the review of that to YouTube. I've been stalling my feet, like putting that out publicly. It's there's always a bunch of hands where I'm just like, oh yeah, there was a pretty straightforward decision. I don't know why I didn't make the straightforward decision. It's just like, why did I do anything else there? Fear. It's the only reason it even seemed complicated.
It's, you know, you spoke something that really hits me, in that sometimes when I don't feel afraid or I don't have anxiety are the times that I play like the worst, where I'm just like, I'm okay. I'm like comfortable getting it in whenever, wherever, doing whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, do. I'm just going about. And then I'm like, I honestly feel like that makes me play worse sometimes because I'm not getting cued to think. I'm not like feeling anxiety that's like propelling me to go deeper. It's almost like, yeah, it's not a good state for me. It's not conducive to me like crushing. There's always that anxiety. I was telling the Wolves the other day that like every time I sit down at the computer, and fire up my tables, or even going to the casino, doesn't even matter the stakes that I'm playing. I feel anxious. It's in my stomach. When I sit down, I am anxious. And the times that I'm super comfortable, it generally means I'm like not into it. I'm distracted. I'm not like locked in. So I really equate anxiety and that fear to being in a competitive mindset where I'm like, okay, I've got to pay the fuck attention because I'm gonna get fucked up if I don't.
Yeah, I mean, think of going hang gliding or something without fear or excitement, just like completely like just snoozing. Like,
All right,
yeah,
all
no,
right.
we get triggered there for a reason. I find one of the trickier things like that also evoked for me, like thinking back to playing lower stakes when I was doing that like rebuild thing. And I did also work on, because I was trying to play like 6 hours a day or whatever. I was like, okay, no, I'm crushing these stakes. I actually need to play more volume. I need to think less. I need to reduce this hypervigilance, because I was slightly like projecting, like I was just giving them too much credit and stuff like that. I was
Yeah.
playing as though I'm playing these 2K and L crushers instead of like 50 and L guys who are just like passive and clicking buttons. So like there still was a need to simmer that down and kind of manage the energy, or playing live to like find that, engage with that in a way where it is fueling but not burning me out. Actually, like managing that level. But yeah, you wouldn't want to push it away. It would still be being aware of it and like tuning into it and like and all that. But
Yeah,
yeah.
our high performance coach in Wolves, Adam Creek, talks a lot about like before, he was doing his rowing competition in the Olympics, that they would thank anxiety, they would thank their fear before they started, because they were like, it's energy. We're going to use this energy to move faster, to be stronger, to operate at a higher level. And that just always really stuck with me, of like, oh, you know what? Like we kind of label this thing as like a negative, but it can actually be like very much a positive, right? Like I think fear has a lot of utility. There's a reason why we feel it, or anxiety as well. I think it does have utility, and it's just the mental framing of it. Like if you're like, oh,
Yeah.
anxiety bad, I don't want it. I don't think that's conducive to playing poker at a high level.
Yeah. And how you relate to discomfort is making me think of it too. Like, is the anxiety or like the hesitation, like, okay, I felt uncomfortable when I played. I'm going to lean into that. I'm going to understand why I was uncomfortable, instead of discomfort bad, don't look or avoid. Yeah, just these subtle ways of working with instead of pushing away, running away from those feelings. Like,
Yeah. There was a old episode of the Tim Ferriss show where a guy was talking about doing things that make you feel uncomfortable to kind of like inoculate you or get you used to feeling that fear. And one of the things was like, to this day, I haven't had the guts to do it, but just draw like a square on your forehead and just walk around in public for a day, right? Like just go out of your way to do something that makes you stand out and makes you different, where people are like looking at you like, oh, that weird person, why does he have that on his head, right? To kind of just get you used to that uncomfortable feeling of like, oh, I'm uncomfortable, and I can still operate, I can still function, I can get used to this, and still like excel. Because I think that in a lot of times in life, the context in which that that what's the context into which that what's the word I'm looking for here? Activity. We'll go with activity. But the context in doing that was that, in a moment of, say, life or death, like something happens where you can do something heroic, or you can like freeze, right? Like cultivating your ability to operate under a lot of pressure and act maybe when other people aren't acting. That was the
yeah,
context of,
like responding instead of like freezing or running away.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that in poker, um, we can probably cultivate that a lot. Like we probably should be cultivating that, because I think a lot of times we freeze. We're in a high pressure
Yeah.
situation and we just fucking freeze. Guy tanks for 7 minutes at the WSOP final table, and I promise you that it's a wild west scene with a, just the thing. I'm losing all my words right
It's
now.
like just like the deer in headlights feeling is
Yeah,
pretty huge. I
nothing is
remember like
happening. It's crickets.
that was one of the I remember working on that really directly, actually. Like I kept just folding way too much in 3-bet pots, and I just had to work on bluff catching. And it was one of those things where it's like I was hoping they were bluffing 35% of the time, and I needed to call 33 or whatever. And so
Yeah.
just training like, okay, it's break even-ish. I just gotta like it's break even-ish. I'm gonna usually lose. I have this fear that comes up, and it would always just be like, okay, fear, I'm not sure, freeze, time bank, fold. And I would be like, oh well, it was out of my hands. Like
Yeah.
but like no, like if I'm defaulting to fold, I'm taking the action of folding, and like that's just what will happen every single time. So then having to face that fear, that deer in headlights feeling, and go, okay, I've got the fear. Is this a spot I'm calling? Because sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. What's the approach? Click the button, live with the result. And that's all I studied. That's all I reviewed for like weeks until I was comfortable making those close decisions again. And
That's great. Working through the fear, being comfortable, and just being able to push through. Tumbleweed, by the way, is what I was thinking.
Oh yeah.
But Darius, our time unfortunately is coming to an end. I always love having conversations with you and talking to you. You're again somebody that I really respect in the poker space, and love your work, love what you're doing. And our final question is going to be, where can the CPG audience find you on the World Wide Web?
Yeah, so like at EQPoker everywhere. I think that's mostly on YouTube and Twitter at the moment. Yeah, at EQPoker.
Awesome, man. Love to have you on for a round 2 in the near future and do more catching up, because as we said in the pre-show, it's been too long.
Yeah, for sure, man. Been a pleasure.
Thank you, man.
This is Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson. Coach Brad approved. Are you a lone wolf searching for the ultimate pack? The CPG Wolf program is a close-knit brotherhood hell-bent on one thing only: chasing poker greatness. Powered by bleeding-edge wolf strats and led by Coach Brad and his lieutenants, CPG Wolves are systematically prepared for almost any spot they'll encounter on the green felt. If you want to plug into an elite team and have a step-by-step game plan to realize your full poker potential, you can apply at cpgwolves.com. Space is limited, and the pack is only as strong as its weakest member. So only the hungriest, grittiest, and most driven will be accepted into the program. Applications are open at cpgwolves.com.